October 5th, 40s. The desert wind carried death that night. Kieran Ghost Blackwood felt it in his bones, that familiar electricity that crackled through the air before violence erupted. 23 years of covert operations had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, and tonight, every nerve ending screamed danger. The weathered veteran stood motionless on the wraparound porch of his isolated ranch house, steel-gray eyes scanning the moonless horizon. At 51, Blackwood carried himself with the fluid grace of a predator, his 6'2" frame deceptively relaxed beneath faded jeans and a black Henley. The October heat still clung to the Texas borderlands like a fever dream, but something colder had settled over Esperanza Valley. His 2,400-acre cattle ranch sprawled across some of the most desolate real estate in America, a deliberate choice. After 2 decades with Delta Force's most classified unit, Blackwood had earned his solitude. The official records listed him as a decorated Army Ranger who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan. The truth was buried so deep that even the Pentagon's blackest files contained only shadows and redacted pages. Ghost Blackwood had been the military's most lethal problem solver. The man they sent when governments needed to pretend certain people had never existed at all. But tonight his past was coming home. The distant rumble of engines cut through the desert silence, multiple vehicles moving fast across the hardpan. Blackwood's hand instinctively moved to the Glock 19 holstered beneath his left arm, muscle memory overriding 3 years of peaceful ranch life. His other hand lifted a pair of military-grade night vision binoculars. Through the green-tinted display, he counted 6 vehicles approaching from the south. Black SUVs and pickup trucks, running without headlights in a tactical formation that spoke of military training. They were still 2 miles out, but closing fast on the only access road to his property. Blackwood had chosen this location specifically because it was tactically defensible high ground, with clear sightlines in all directions, a single approach route that could be easily monitored, and most importantly, no neighbors for 20 miles in any direction. What happened on the Ghost Ranch stayed on the Ghost Ranch. He moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory guiding him through preparations he'd prayed he'd never need again. The innocent-looking ranch house was actually a fortress disguised as rural Americana. Reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, a state-of-the-art surveillance system, and enough weaponry to outfit a small army, all hidden behind the facade of weathered cedar siding and rustic charm. In the basement, behind a false wall that looked like storage shelving, lay Blackwood's private armory. As he descended the stairs, motion sensors activated LED strips that illuminated enough firepower to make a SWAT team weep with envy. Ream-4 carbines, a Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle, fragmentation grenades, claymore mines, and specialized equipment that officially didn't exist. But it was the manila folder on the metal desk that made his blood run cold. 3 weeks ago, it had arrived via a courier who'd disappeared into the night without a word. Inside were photographs, documents, and a single sheet of paper with 2 words written in elegant Spanish script. "We know." The photos showed him in Somalia, 1993, Baghdad, 2004. A compound in Syria that had been erased from every map. Faces of men who died by his hand in shadows and silence. Operations that had saved thousands of lives while damning his soul. Someone had done the impossible. They'd identified Ghost Blackwood. The documents revealed how Maria Isabella Vega-Morales, the 18-year-old daughter of Esperanza Morales, had been studying international relations at UT Austin, brilliant, curious, and fatally determined to research her graduate thesis on American military interventions in Latin America. She'd somehow connected enough dots to trace Blackwood's involvement in Operation Serpent's Nest, a 2019 mission that had eliminated her grandfather, Cartel leader Esteban El Diablo Morales. The girl had been found dead in her dormitory 3 weeks ago, an apparent suicide. But Blackwood knew better. The cartel had silenced her permanently, but not before she'd shared her research with someone else. Now the granddaughter's family wanted answers, and blood. Through his surveillance system, Blackwood watched the convoy turn onto his property. The vehicles moved with the confidence of predators who believed they were hunting sheep. They had no idea they'd just entered the den of the most dangerous man the U.S. military had ever produced. As the lead SUV crested the hill half a mile from his house, Blackwood's satellite phone buzzed. The caller ID showed only numbers, but he recognized the sequence his former commanding officer, General Patricia Hayes. Ghost. Her voice carried the weight of 20 years of shared secrets. Intel suggests the Morales cartel is moving against you tonight. 6 vehicles, approximately 30 men. Blackwood's voice held no emotion. They are already here. Jesus, can you extract? Negative. They'd follow, and I won't bring this to innocent people. He paused, watching the convoy deploy in textbook assault formation. Besides, it's been too long since I have had proper exercise. Kieran, listen to me. These aren't street thugs. Esperanza Morales has been recruiting ex-military, former Mexican special forces, discharged American veterans, even some European operators. This is a professional hit squad. Blackwood almost smiled. Then it will be a fair fight. This isn't a joke, Ghost. The Morales organization has unlimited resources and nothing left to lose. Esperanza's entire family is dead because of Operation Serpent's Nest. Her father, her brothers, her grandfather, we took them all. She's spent 3 years and $30 million tracking you down. Then she's about to learn why they called me Ghost. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Hayes spoke again, her voice carried the weight of command decisions that had shaped decades of shadow warfare. If you survive this, disappear. New identity, new life. The organization will handle the cleanup, but this can never trace back to the unit. Understood. And Ghost, give them hell. The phone went dead as the first vehicle rolled to a stop 300 yards from the house. Through his scope, Blackwood watched armed figures deploy from the vehicles with military precision. They wore tactical gear and carried professional-grade weapons, AR-15s, tactical shotguns, even what looked like an M240 machine gun. But they'd made their first mistake by stopping outside effective rifle range. Blackwood slipped into the mental state that had made him legendary within the special operations community. Emotion drained away, replaced by cold calculation. The ranch house became a battlefield, every piece of furniture a potential cover position, every shadow a tactical advantage. He'd designed this property as the perfect kill zone. Motion sensors hidden throughout the approach routes, remotely detonated charges buried at strategic choke points, and overlapping fields of fire that turned the open ground around his house into a death trap. The attackers didn't know they weren't the hunters anymore. They were the prey. Through the thermal scope of his Barrett .50 caliber, positioned at a second-floor window with a clear view of the kill zone, Blackwood watched a figure emerge from the lead vehicle. Even at distance, he could tell this was the leader the way the others deferred. The confidence in every movement. Esperanza Morales stepped into the moonlight. She was beautiful in the way that desert storms were beautiful, dangerous, unpredictable, and absolutely lethal. Mid-30s, athletic build, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned violence as a survival skill. Her long black hair was pulled back in a tactical ponytail, and she wore military-style cargo pants and a Kevlar vest that spoke of professional preparation. But it was her eyes that made Blackwood pause. Even through the scope, he could see the cold intelligence that had built a cartel empire from the ashes of her family's deaths. This wasn't a grief-stricken granddaughter seeking revenge. This was a predator who'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment. She raised a megaphone to her lips. Kieran Blackwood. Her voice carried clearly across the desert air, accented English, precise and controlled. My name is Esperanza Morales. You killed my family. I know who you are. I know what you have done. Come out and we can discuss this like civilized people. Blackwood's finger rested lightly on the trigger. One shot would end this before it began. But something held him back, perhaps professional curiosity. perhaps respect for an opponent who'd accomplished the impossible by finding him. "I know you are listening," she continued. "I know about Operation Serpent's Nest. I know about the compound in Jalisco where you executed my grandfather. I know about the 17 other operations where you eliminated my family members one by one." The words hit like physical blows. Blackwood had convinced himself those kills were clean, surgical, necessary, removing cancer from the world. But hearing them described as a systematic extermination of a family, even a criminal family, brought an unfamiliar twist of something that might have been guilt. "You took everything from me." Esperanza's voice carried pain now, the mask of control slipping slightly. "My father, my uncles, my cousins, children. Blackwood, you killed children." That wasn't true, and they both knew it. Blackwood had never harmed non-combatants. But truth and perception were different creatures, and in Esperanza's world, he was the monster who destroyed her bloodline. "But I'm not like you," she continued. "I don't murder families. I don't hide in shadows. I'm giving you a choice. Walk out that front door with your hands visible, and we will have a conversation. Refuse, and my people will burn that house to the ground with you inside it." Through his thermal scope, Blackwood watched her soldiers spread out in professional formation. These weren't cartel foot soldiers. Hayes had been right, these were trained operators. Their movement patterns, weapon discipline, and tactical spacing spoke of serious military training. But they'd made their second mistake by giving him time to prepare. His fingers found the remote detonator for the perimeter charges. 12 claymore mines positioned along the most likely approach routes, each one loaded with 700 steel ball bearings capable of shredding anything within a 50-meter radius. The attackers had positioned themselves perfectly for what the military called enfilade fire shots that would rake along their formation like scythe strokes through wheat. "You have 60 seconds to decide," Esperanza called out. Blackwood keyed his radio system, a voice modulator disguising his tone as he broadcast on the frequency he'd observed their communications using. "This is your only warning. Leave now or none of you will see sunrise." The response was immediate. Muzzle flashes erupted from multiple positions as the assault team opened fire on his house. High-velocity rounds slammed into reinforced walls, bulletproof windows sparked with impacts, and the night exploded into chaos. But Blackwood was already moving. He triggered the first set of claymores. The explosions lit up the desert like miniature suns, and the screaming began. 3 years of peaceful ranch life evaporated in an instant, replaced by the cold fury of Ghost Blackwood. The most decorated and dangerous operator in Delta Force history was back in his element, and he was very, very angry. The war for Esperanza Valley had begun. Through the chaos of explosions and gunfire, Blackwood's enhanced audio system picked up Esperanza's voice screaming orders in rapid-fire Spanish. She was still alive, still in command, still dangerous. Her surviving soldiers were regrouping with impressive discipline despite the casualties from his opening gambit. He moved through the house like a wraith, years of urban combat experience guiding him through the familiar layout. At the kitchen window, he paused long enough to send 3 precision shots from his M4 carbine, dropping 2 figures who'd been maneuvering toward his rear entrance. But something was wrong. The return fire was too precise, too coordinated. These soldiers weren't just trained, they knew his house. They were hitting weak points in his defenses, targeting specific windows and doors that offered the best access routes. Someone had provided them with intelligence about his property. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just revenge, it was betrayal. Someone within his own organization had sold him out. As if summoned by his thoughts, his satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted text message. Ghost compromise confirmed. Multiple agency penetration. Trust no one. Backup en route. ETA unknown. Survive. Phoenix. His former partner, the only person alive who knew all his secrets. If Phoenix was warning him about penetration at the highest levels, then this attack was just the beginning of something much larger. Blackwood felt the familiar ice-cold clarity that had made him legendary settle over his mind. He was alone, outnumbered, and facing enemies who knew too much about his capabilities and defenses. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation where Ghost Blackwood did his best work. He smiled for the first time in 3 years, and it was a terrible thing to see. The real war was about to begin. 12:23 a.m. The desert had become a symphony of violence. Blackwood moved through his fortress like a specter of death, each step calculated, each breath controlled. The house that had been his sanctuary for 3 years now served as the perfect killing ground. Every piece of furniture, every doorway, every shadow had been positioned with tactical precision. Through the reinforced walls, he could hear Esperanza's voice cutting through the chaos. Sharp commands in Spanish that spoke of military training and battlefield experience. She wasn't just some cartel princess playing soldier, she was a genuine threat. The thermal scope on his Barrett revealed the grim arithmetic of warfare. His opening barrage had reduced their numbers from 30 to 22, but the survivors were adapting with disturbing efficiency. They'd identified his muzzle flashes, calculated his fields of fire, and were now executing a textbook assault pattern that would have impressed his former instructors at Fort Bragg. Someone had trained these people very, very well. Blackwood slipped through the kitchen into his study, where multiple monitors displayed feeds from hidden cameras throughout his property. What he saw made his blood freeze. The attacking force wasn't just using military tactics, they were using his tactics. The exact same approach patterns he'd developed for close-quarters battle, the precise room-clearing techniques that were classified above top secret, movement procedures that existed only in the deepest vaults of Delta Force training manuals. This wasn't coincidence. This was intelligence so detailed, so specific, that it could only have come from someone who'd been there when these techniques were developed. Someone who'd fought beside him. The satellite phone buzzed with another encrypted message from Phoenix. Ghost, archive everything. Falcon is compromised. Repeat. Falcon is compromised. Trust only Raven protocols. Falcon. General Patricia Hayes, his former commanding officer. The woman who'd sent him on every black operation for 2 decades. The person who'd called to warn him about tonight's attack. The person who'd had ample time to tip off the attackers about his defenses. Blackwood felt the familiar cold rage that had made him the military's most feared operative. Betrayal was a knife that cut deeper than any bullet, and Hayes had been like a mother to him. If she'd sold him out, then everything he'd believed about honor, duty, and brotherhood was a lie. A thunderous explosion shook the house as something heavy impacted the reinforced front door. Through his monitors, he watched a team of 4 operators deploying breaching charges with professional precision. They knew exactly where to place the explosives for maximum effect. Another detail that spoke of inside intelligence. But Blackwood had prepared for this moment. He triggered the second wave of defensive measures. The welcome mats positioned outside each entrance were pressure-sensitive mines designed to look like ordinary doormats. The explosion sent shockwaves through the desert night, and 3 more heat signatures vanished from his thermal display. 19 left. But even as his defenses extracted their toll, Blackwood could see the attackers adapting. They weren't retreating or breaking formation. Instead, they were executing what he recognized as a Phoenix protocol, a specialized assault technique for attacking fortified positions that he'd personally developed during the siege of Ramadi. The technique had never been written down, never been officially documented. The only people who knew it were the 12 members of his original Delta team, 11 of whom were dead. The 12th was codenamed Phoenix, his former partner, his closest friend, the person who'd just warned him about the betrayal, the person who'd taught these killers how to murder him. Through his audio surveillance, Blackwood heard Esperanza's voice, issuing new commands. But this time she was speaking English. Remember, we need him alive for questioning. Wound to disable. Don't kill unless absolutely necessary. alive for questioning, which meant this wasn't just about revenge. They wanted information, intelligence that only Ghost Blackwood possessed. But what could he know that was worth this level of effort? The answer came in the form of fragmented memories, pieces of a puzzle he'd been too buried in grief and isolation to assemble. Operation Serpent's Nest hadn't just eliminated the Morales cartel leadership, it had also uncovered something else, something that had been hastily classified and buried so deep that even he'd been ordered to forget it. But soldiers trained to remember everything don't forget. They just bury memories beneath layers of operational security and willful blindness. Now, with death closing in from all sides, those memories began to surface. The compound in Jalisco hadn't just been a cartel stronghold. It had been a meeting place, a neutral ground where criminal organizations intersected with something far more dangerous. In the final briefing room, behind a hidden panel that their intelligence hadn't identified, Blackwood had discovered evidence of the unthinkable. American military technology being sold to the highest bidders. Weapons, surveillance systems, even operational intelligence about U.S. forces in the field. A network of corruption that reached from street-level dealers all the way to the Pentagon's most classified programs. He'd reported the discovery through proper channels, then been ordered to destroy all evidence and never speak of it again. The official after-action report mentioned only the successful elimination of cartel leadership. But someone knew he'd seen those files. Someone knew he was a loose end that needed to be tied off. The attack tonight wasn't just revenge. It was a cleanup operation. A massive explosion rocked the south wall of the house as the attackers deployed what sounded like military-grade plastic explosives. These weren't street criminals with anger management issues. They were professional killers with unlimited resources and detailed intelligence about his capabilities. Blackwood grabbed his go-bag from beneath the desk and slung the Barrett across his back. The house was compromised, but he'd prepared for this contingency. Hidden throughout his property were supply caches, weapon stashes, and fallback positions that would let him turn the entire ranch into a battlefield. He activated the house's final defensive measure, a network of thermite charges, designed to destroy all evidence of his presence. In 30 minutes, the building would be reduced to ash and melted metal, taking with it any proof that Ghost Blackwood had ever existed. But first, he had a war to win. The basement tunnel system he'd constructed during his first year on the ranch provided access to the barn, the equipment shed, and 3 separate bunkers positioned at tactical intervals around the property. Each location was stocked with enough weapons and supplies to support extended operations. As he moved through the narrow tunnel toward the barn, Blackwood's mind raced through possible scenarios. 20 operatives, professional training, detailed intelligence about his capabilities. In a straight fight, even he couldn't take those odds. But asymmetric warfare was his specialty, turning superior numbers into a disadvantage through superior positioning and psychological pressure. The barn contained his most specialized equipment, tools of war that officially didn't exist, night vision systems that could see through smoke and thermal interference, sound suppressors that reduced muzzle signatures to whispers, ammunition designed to penetrate body armor at extended range. And in the hidden compartment beneath his workbench, the equipment he'd prayed he'd never need again. The injection kit contained enough fentanyl-based paralytic agent to incapacitate a dozen men. The plastic restraints were military-grade, designed to hold even trained operators. The interrogation tools were crude but effective: car battery, jumper cables, and a selection of implements that spoke to mankind's infinite creativity in inflicting pain. Ghost Blackwood had been many things during his military career, but he'd never been a torturer. That line he'd never crossed, even when ordered to do so by superior officers. Tonight, those rules no longer applied. Through the barn's reinforced windows, he could see muzzle flashes as the attackers systematically destroyed his house. They were being thorough, professional, making sure he couldn't double back to any prepared positions. But they'd made a critical error in their intelligence gathering. The house wasn't his primary defensive position. It was the bait. Hidden beneath the property were tunnels that connected to observation posts, positioned throughout the surrounding hills. Each post was equipped with long-range rifles, communications equipment, and enough supplies for extended siege operations. From these elevated positions, he could engage targets at ranges where return fire would be ineffective. More importantly, he could observe and identify the real threat through the scope of a rifle positioned in the eastern observation post, accessed via a tunnel that emerged behind a cluster of boulders half a mile from the house. Blackwood studied the assault team with professional interest. They moved like ghosts themselves, flowing between cover positions with the fluid grace that came from years of experience in urban warfare. Their equipment was top-tier night vision systems, encrypted communications, weapons that cost more than most people made in a year. But it was their leader that held his attention. Esperanza Morales commanded her forces with the natural authority of someone born to warfare. She wasn't hiding behind cover, wasn't delegating dangerous tasks to subordinates. She was leading from the front, exposing herself to the same risks as her soldiers. Through his scope, Blackwood could see her face clearly for the first time. Beautiful, yes, but marked by something harder than mere grief. This was a woman who'd built an empire from ashes, who'd survived in a world where weakness meant death. She was also carrying equipment that made his blood run cold. The device clipped to her tactical vest was a military-grade signal detector, capable of identifying electronic surveillance systems from significant distances, which meant she knew about his hidden cameras, his motion sensors, his carefully constructed intelligence network. Someone had given her the technical specifications for every defensive system on his property. As if summoned by his observation, Esperanza turned toward his position and raised a pair of binoculars. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, predator and prey studied each other across the killing ground. Then she smiled and spoke directly into her radio, her voice carrying clearly through his intercepted communications. "Good evening, Ghost. I know you are watching. I know about the observation posts, the tunnel system, the supply caches. Did you really think we'd come here blind?" Blackwood's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot would end this nightmare, but something held him back. Professional curiosity, perhaps, or the soldier's instinct to gather intelligence before committing to action. "I also know about Jalisco," she continued, her voice carrying clearly through the encrypted channel. "About the files you discovered. About the network that's been selling American secrets to the highest bidders for the past 15 years. The words hit like physical blows. She knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew about the discovery that had been classified above his clearance level. "That's why you are here, isn't it?" Esperanza's voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. "You thought this was about revenge for my family, but you are not here because you killed my grandfather. You are here because you discovered who's been betraying your country." Through his scope, Blackwood watched her gesture to one of her soldiers, who produced a tablet computer and began displaying images that made his world collapse. Photographs of American military bases, technical specifications for classified weapon systems, personnel files for undercover operatives, battle plans for operations that hadn't been executed yet. And at the center of it all, like a spider in the web, the face of General Patricia Hayes. "Your commanding officer has been selling American secrets for over a decade," Esperanza continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Military technology, operational intelligence, even the locations of safe houses and extraction points. How do you think my people have been so successful at eliminating American assets throughout Latin America?" The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Every mission that had gone sideways, every operation where the enemy had seemed to anticipate their moves, every good soldier who died because the wrong people had the right intelligence, all of it traced back to the woman he'd trusted with his life for 20 years. But here's the truly beautiful part, Esperanza said. And now her voice carried the cold satisfaction of someone savoring revenge. General Hayes didn't just sell you out to protect her network. She sold you out because she knew you'd discovered the truth about Jalisco. You were becoming a liability. Blackwood felt the world tilt beneath him. Hayes hadn't just betrayed him. She'd orchestrated his elimination to protect a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of the American military. So now you have a choice, Esperanza continued. You can die here tonight, another casualty in a war you don't understand, or you can help me expose the people who have been selling your country's secrets. Through his scope, Blackwood watched her signal to her remaining soldiers. They began withdrawing from their assault positions, creating space for negotiation. I'm going to walk toward your position now, she said, alone and unarmed. We are going to have a conversation about mutual enemies and shared interests. Blackwood watched in fascination as Esperanza Morales stripped off her tactical vest, removed her sidearm, and began walking across the killing ground with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. She was either the bravest person he'd ever encountered or the most foolish. As she approached his position, close enough now that he could see her eyes through his scope, Blackwood realized there was a third possibility. She was right. 1:17 a.m., October 16th. Esperanza Morales walked through the kill zone like she owned it. No body armor, no weapons, just absolute confidence and the kind of courage that either got people killed or made them legends. Through his scope, Blackwood tracked her approach, finger resting lightly on the trigger, mind calculating distances and wind speed from pure habit. She stopped 50 meters from his position, close enough to talk, far enough to dive for cover if negotiations went sideways. I know you were debating whether to kill me, she called out, her accented English carrying clearly through the desert air. It would be the smart tactical choice. Eliminate the threat, scatter the remaining forces, disappear into whatever hole you have prepared for this scenario. Blackwood remained silent, letting her talk. Information was ammunition, and she seemed eager to spend hers freely. But you won't, she continued, because you are not just a killer, despite what your file says. You are a soldier, and soldiers understand the difference between enemies and obstacles. Tell me about Jalisco, Blackwood finally spoke, his voice carrying through the concealed speaker system he'd installed throughout the property. Let her think he was still mobile, still unpredictable. Esperanza smiled, the expression visible through his scope. My grandfather wasn't just a cartel leader. He was a businessman who understood that information was more valuable than cocaine. For 15 years, he'd been buying American military secrets from your General Hayes. The words hit like physical blows, but Blackwood kept his voice steady. Prove it. The compound you raided wasn't just a meeting place for criminals. It was a marketplace for traitors. Hayes would deliver intelligence packages, troop movements, safe house locations, undercover identities, and my grandfather would pay premium prices for American blood. She gestured toward her tablet, which one of her soldiers had positioned where Blackwood could see it through his scope. The screen displayed what looked like bank records, transaction histories showing millions of dollars flowing from cartel accounts to a series of shell companies. 15 years, Ghost. 15 years of your brothers and sisters dying because someone was selling their locations to the highest bidders. How many operations went wrong? How many good soldiers never came home because the enemy knew exactly where to find them? Blackwood's mind raced through the memories, missions that had felt cursed from the start. Intelligence that had always seemed one step behind. Casualties that had never made sense. The siege of Kandahar, where his entire team had been ambushed. The extraction in Somalia, where the safe house had been compromised before they'd even arrived. The night infiltration in Syria, where enemy forces had been waiting in perfect ambush positions. All of it orchestrated by someone who knew their plans before they did. But Jalisco was different, Esperanza continued. You weren't supposed to find that room. Hayes had told my grandfather the raid would be a standard sweep and clear. In and out before anyone could destroy the evidence. She didn't know you'd do what you always do. Dig deeper, look harder, find things that were supposed to stay hidden. So she ordered me to forget what I'd seen. And when you proved too honorable to be bought and too dangerous to leave alone, she decided you needed to disappear permanently. Esperanza's voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. She's been planning this for 3 years, Ghost. Feeding my family intelligence about American operations, letting us eliminate her competition while she built her network. She knew eventually we'd discover your role in our losses, and you decided to do her dirty work for her. Wrong. The word cracked like a whip. I decided to use her betrayal to expose the entire network. Think about it, why would I come here with this many resources just to kill one man? I could have hired professional assassins for a fraction of the cost. I could have had you eliminated quietly, efficiently, with no risk to my own people. Blackwood was beginning to understand. You wanted a public confrontation, something that would draw attention. I wanted witnesses. I wanted evidence. I wanted the kind of spectacular failure that would force someone to investigate. Esperanza smiled again, but this time it was predatory. Hayes thinks I'm here to clean up her loose ends. She has no idea I'm here to cut off her head. Through his communications intercept system, Blackwood heard the distant sound of helicopters approaching from the north. Multiple aircraft, flying in tactical formation. His HUD display identified them as UH-60 Black Hawks military transport birds. That will be your cavalry, Esperanza said, somehow knowing what he was hearing. Hayes is coming personally to oversee the cleanup. She can't risk you being taken alive, not with what you know about the Jalisco files. How many? Full tactical team. 40 operators, Delta Force level training, equipment that officially doesn't exist. Esperanza's voice carried grim satisfaction. She's not taking any chances this time. Blackwood felt the familiar ice-cold clarity settle over his mind. 40 operators meant professional soldiers, men who'd been told they were conducting a legitimate mission against a rogue agent. They wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't question orders, wouldn't show mercy. But they also wouldn't know they were walking into a trap. What do you want from me? He asked. Partnership. Your skills, my resources, our mutual hatred of the people who have been selling American lives for profit. Esperanza stepped closer, now close enough that he could see her eyes clearly. Hayes betrayed you. Phoenix betrayed you. Your own country betrayed you. But I'm offering you something they never did, which is the truth, and a chance to make them pay for it. The helicopters were closer now, their rotor wash beginning to disturb the desert dust. Blackwood made a decision that went against every instinct he developed in 23 years of military service. He stepped out of concealment. Esperanza didn't flinch as he emerged from the rocks. Rifle at low, ready, night vision goggles pushed up on his forehead. At 51, Kieran Blackwood looked like exactly what he was, a weapon shaped by decades of warfare. Lean and hard and absolutely lethal. If we are doing this, he said, we do it my way. I wouldn't have it any other. Your people take positions in the secondary ring. Long-range fire support only. This is going to get surgical, and I don't want friendly fire casualties. Esperanza keyed her radio, issuing rapid commands in Spanish. Her remaining soldiers began moving to predetermined positions with the efficiency of professionals who knew their business. What's the plan? She asked. Blackwood smiled, and it was the expression that had earned him the call sign Ghost. We are going to give General Hayes exactly what she wants. A dead traitor and a convenient explanation for everything that's gone wrong. Just not the traitor she's expecting. Exactly. The house exploded right on schedule. Thermite charges reduced 3 years of peaceful ranch life to molten metal and ash, sending a pillar of fire into the desert night that could be seen for 20 miles. To anyone watching from a distance, it would look like the perfect end to a perfect operation. But Blackwood had designed the charges for maximum spectacle, minimum actual destruction of the important areas. The basement bunker, with its reinforced walls and independent air supply, had survived intact. More importantly, the surveillance equipment housed there was still recording everything. The helicopters touched down in tactical formation, disgorging soldiers who moved with the fluid precision of America's elite warriors. Through his binoculars, Blackwood watched them deploy in textbook assault patterns, securing a perimeter that would prevent anyone from escaping the kill zone. They were good, professional, deadly. They were also completely unprepared for what was coming. "Ghost to all call signs," Blackwood whispered into his radio. "Execute Protocol 7. Protocol 7 had been his innovation during the siege of Ramadi, a psychological warfare technique designed to turn superior numbers into a disadvantage. The key was making the enemy paranoid, uncertain, afraid of shadows and sounds that might or might not be real. Hidden throughout the property were speakers connected to his communications system. As the assault team advanced on the burning house, the desert began to whisper. "Bravo 6, this is Command. We show movement on your 6 o'clock. Negative, Command. No movement visible. Alpha Team, you have unknown signatures approaching from the east. East is clear, Command. Repeat, east is clear." The voices were synthetic, generated by software Blackwood had developed for psychological operations, but they sounded real enough to create doubt, hesitation, the kind of confusion that got soldiers killed in close-quarters combat. Through his scope, he watched the assault team begin to fragment as squad leaders tried to respond to threats that didn't exist. They were still dangerous, still professional, but they were no longer operating as a cohesive unit. That's when Esperanza's people opened fire. Muzzle flashes erupted from positions throughout the hills surrounding the ranch. Precision shots that picked off isolated soldiers with surgical accuracy. These weren't spray-and-pray cartel foot soldiers, they were snipers who'd learned their trade in some of the world's most dangerous conflicts. The assault team reacted with impressive discipline, immediately shifting into defensive positions and calling for air support. But their radios were being jammed by equipment that officially didn't exist, and their thermal imaging systems were being confused by decoy heat sources. Blackwood had positioned throughout the property. Within minutes, 40 operators had been reduced to a scattered collection of individuals fighting shadows and phantoms. But it was the figure emerging from the lead helicopter that held Blackwood's attention. General Patricia Hayes stepped onto the killing ground like she owned it, her silver hair gleaming under the tactical lights, her uniform crisp despite the desert heat. At 62, she still carried herself with the ramrod posture of a career soldier, but her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who'd learned to profit from other people's deaths. "Blackwood," her voice carried clearly through the chaos, amplified by military-grade communications equipment. "I know you are out there. This ends now. Surrender, and I will make sure your death is quick." "Actually," Blackwood's voice echoed from speakers positioned throughout the hills, "I think your death will be considerably slower." Hayes spun toward the sound, her sidearm appearing in her hand with the fluid motion of someone who'd spent decades in active combat zones. But she was shooting at ghosts. The speakers were decoys, the real transmission coming from equipment she couldn't locate or target. 23 years, Patricia. 23 years I trusted you with my life. How many good soldiers died because you were selling their locations to the highest bidders? You don't understand the bigger picture, Hayes replied, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who'd rationalized the unthinkable. The intelligence we provided saved more lives than it cost. The cartels would have killed those people anyway, at least this way. We could control the flow of information, protect our most valuable assets. Bullshit. The word echoed from a dozen different speakers, creating a surround sound effect that made Hayes spin in confusion. You did it for money, pure and simple. Money that funded black operations your precious Congress would never approve. Money that kept America safe while politicians played games with national security. Hayes gestured to her scattered soldiers, who were still engaged in firefights with invisible enemies. You think this is about greed? This is about pragmatism. Sometimes good people have to do terrible things to protect the greater good. Tell that to the families of everyone who died because you sold them out." Esperanza's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Tell that to my 18-year-old niece, who was murdered because she discovered your network." Hayes turned toward the new voice, her face showing genuine surprise for the first time. Through his scope, Blackwood watched understanding dawn in the general's eyes. "Esperanza Morales. I should have known." Hayes's voice carried grudging respect. "You have been planning this for longer than I thought. 3 years. 3 years of following the money, tracking the connections, building evidence that even your people can't ignore." Esperanza stepped into the light, no longer hiding behind cover. "Did you really think you could betray everyone and never pay for it? I think I can kill everyone who knows the truth and write the after-action report however I choose." Hayes raised her weapon, targeting Esperanza with professional precision. That's when Blackwood materialized from the shadows like his call sign promised. 23 years of the world's most advanced combat training distilled into one perfect moment of violence. His knife took Hayes in the throat before she could pull the trigger, the blade sliding between vertebrae with surgical precision. General Patricia Hayes, decorated war hero and career traitor, died gurgling her own blood in the Texas desert. But her death was just the beginning. The surviving assault team members, realizing their commanding officer was down, began converging on Blackwood's position with the grim determination of professionals completing a mission. They didn't know about the conspiracy, didn't understand the betrayal. They just knew a general had been killed and their duty was to respond with overwhelming force. Blackwood felt the familiar weight of moral complexity that had haunted his entire military career. These were good soldiers following bad orders, men who deserved better than dying for a corrupt system they didn't understand. "This is Ghost Actual," he broadcast on their tactical frequency, using authentication codes that would identify him as legitimate Delta Force Command Authority. "Mission abort. Repeat, mission abort. Stand down and await extraction." The voice of training and hierarchy cut through combat adrenaline. One by one, the assault team members ceased fire and began establishing defensive positions. They were confused, uncertain, but they were soldiers when a superior officer with proper authentication gave orders. They followed them. Esperanza emerged from cover, her surviving soldiers maintaining overwatch positions throughout the hills. The immediate battle was over, but both she and Blackwood knew this was just the beginning of a much larger war. "Hayes won't be the only one," she said, gesturing toward the general's body. "Networks like this have redundancies, fail-safes, people positioned throughout the military hierarchy. Then we find them all." Blackwood's voice carried the cold finality of a man who'd found his purpose again. "Every last one. That could take years. I have got time." As if summoned by their conversation, Blackwood's satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Phoenix. "Ghost cleanup teams inbound. Official story, training accident, no survivors. New identities prepared for extraction. This ends here." Blackwood showed the message to Esperanza, who smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Phoenix still thinks we are playing by the old rules," she said. "He has no idea we have already won." She was right. Hidden throughout the property, Blackwood's surveillance equipment had recorded everything: the attack, the betrayal, Hayes's confession, the evidence of corruption reaching to the highest levels of the military hierarchy. By morning, copies would be in the hands of journalists, congressional investigators, and international law enforcement agencies. The conspiracy that had killed so many good soldiers was about to be exposed to the light. But as they watched the cleanup helicopters approaching from the horizon, Blackwood felt the familiar weight of unfinished business. Phoenix was still out there, still believing he could control the narrative, still dangerous to anyone who knew the truth. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," he said to Esperanza. "Your former partner. He's not just my former partner. He's the only person alive who knows all my capabilities, all my methods, all my weaknesses. Blackwood's voice carried grim certainty. He will come for us eventually, both of us. Then we will be ready. This isn't your fight anymore. You got what you came for. Hayes is dead. The network is exposed. Your family is avenged. Esperanza studied him with eyes that had seen too much violence, too much betrayal, too much death. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute decision. I told you 3 years ago that you took everything from me, but I was wrong. She gestured toward the burning remains of his house, the scattered evidence of battle, the bodies of people who died because of other people's greed. You gave me something I'd lost, a reason to fight for something bigger than revenge. And what's that? Justice. As the cleanup teams began their descent toward the kill zone, two of the world's most dangerous people stood together in the desert night, united by shared loss and common purpose. The war against the conspiracy was just beginning, but they'd already won the most important victory. They'd survived to fight another day. And somewhere in the shadows, Phoenix was planning his next move, unaware that the ghosts he'd helped create were coming for him. The desert wind carried death that night, but it also carried the promise of reckoning. Ghost Blackwood was back in the war business, and this time he knew exactly who the enemy was.